All right. Hi guys. So very good evening. I hope you're able to see me, hear me, and also see the screen. So if the setup is fine and if you're able to hear me properly, send a yes, hi, good evening, something in the chat, and let's get started. All right, great. So we're still waiting for a few more people to join in. But before we get to the concepts, again, there is a couple of puzzles for you. So we'll start with that. And then, when more people join in, like in 2 to 3 minutes, we'll start with the concepts, right? So here, again, I have three puzzles for you. And two of them are normal kind of puzzles that we have seen before also. But there is one question which is slightly more technical, right? So I will have more technical questions in the next few sessions as well. But we are, now sort of diving into the technical kind of questions as well. So here is the first one for you. So as always, take a minute, think about it, and then put your answers in the chat. Here's the very first one. Right. So this is the first question for you. It says, I have city, but no houses. I have mountains, but no trees. I have water, but no fish. What am I? So take a minute, think about it, and then put your answers in the chat. I'll give you a minute. We'll discuss the correct answer and we'll move to the next one. All right, great. So yes, the correct answer here is a map. So whoever said map got it right. So again, a map has cities, but no houses. A map has mountains, but no trees. A map has water, but no fish. So map is the correct answer. Perfect. Here's the second one. So again, this is very simple. Think about it and put your answers in the chat. All right, yes. So there are two correct answers here. I'm sure there can be many more. One of the correct answers is a pencil, right? So pencil is tall when it's new, when it's young, and then as and when we use it, it grows old, it becomes shorter, right? So pencil is a correct answer, is one correct answer. Eraser is another correct answer. I don't think anybody guessed that, but eraser is also a correct answer here. So if you buy an eraser, it's big, and then when we keep rubbing it off, it basically, or when we keep erasing it, it reduces in size. So that's another example of it. Ink, again, ink is not exactly new or young or tall. We replace it. So that's a different story. Hair is not the right answer. It can grow with us. If we don't cut it, we can have longer hair as well. So that's not true. But yes, pencil, eraser, and candle. Those are three correct answers. All of them are acceptable. All of them fulfill this criteria. So pencil, eraser, candle, these three answers will work. Great. Now here's the technical question for you. So I'll give you one extra minute for this. So I'll give you 2 minutes for this. And I am going to disable the chat for 2 minutes. Okay, I've disabled the chat for 2 minutes because I don't want you to repeat other people's answers, or I don't want you to see other people's answers. I want you to think about this for 2 minutes. Okay, so the question is, how can we add two numbers without using the addition operator? I'm going to enable the chat in 2 minutes, and then I let you know so that you can then put your answers in the chat. But I don't want anybody putting answers before that. So that's why I've disabled the chat for 2 minutes. Give it a thought, and I let you know when the chat is enabled. Okay, and the chat is enabled now. So you can now put your answers in the chat. Add method will still use the add thing. So that's not the correct answer. Increment again is not the correct answer. Concatenation is not the correct answer. The correct answer is A minus minus B, right? So we can say A minus minus B. So basically we do the negation of B and then we subtract it from A. This gives us A plus B. Okay, so this is the technically the most accurate answer, A minus minus B. But sure, there are other things like we might use a binary conversion or even then we will need to add them. Even if we convert it to binary, we will still need addition. But yes, there are ways like 2's complement. There could be other ways as well. But the simplest answer that I was looking for that we use on a daily basis is instead of the addition operator, we can use the subtraction operator. So that will be like A minus minus B, right? So A minus and then minus B. This would be the simplest answer out of whatever is mentioned or whatever is needed. This will work. So this will then become A plus B, and that is what we are looking for. Okay. So that's the correct answer here. All right, perfect. I am sure there are other ways like using maybe division or multiplication or whatever. I am not aware, like I will have to think, but the simplest one is this A minus minus B. All right, perfect. Now that brings us to the next bit of the next topic rather of the sessions. And again, before that, I will just let you know that the GitHub repository has been updated. Right. So it's up to date with yesterday's code or the code from the previous session. So that's already in place. Right. So I'll just show that to you quickly and then we'll move to the next part. I am yet to add the recording from the last one. I will add it today, but the other parts are added. So from session 6, I've already added the files where we had written the JavaScript API calls and all of that, right? So in the previous session, if you remember, we were talking about API calls. And again, this is the repository link. The repository has been updated with everything except for the recording. So I will update that as well soon. The recording of the last session is yet to be added. Everything else is available over there. Now, in yesterday's session or in the previous session, which was on Monday, like not yesterday, but when I say yesterday's session, I mean the last session. In session 6, we discussed a very important concept around, moving things to or connecting to things from the front end to back end. So it was a mediation between front end and back end. Right? We have talked about something called an API or an application programming interface. So we have talked about this and we were able to understand, take examples, write some code to understand how different web applications talk to each other. So that's something that is done. Now, in today's session, we are going to start our discussion on a very simple level, on a very basic level for the backend, right? So if you remember, for the front end, we have discussed HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And for the backend, we are going to discuss Python and MySQL. Okay, so Python is for Django, which is going to be our framework. And Django uses MySQL or SQLite database by default. So we're going to stick to SQL database, which will come in later. So today's session is going to be the fundamentals of Python, but with more code examples, more real world code examples, not like 2+2 kind of code, but more realistic code that we will use or we will see, on a daily basis as a developer. So we'll take a look at some of those code pieces. I have some 15, 16 code pieces with me that I will share with you guys one by one. And we'll go very slow. I'll walk you through everything step by step, line by line, and we're going to go and discuss this, right? So the first thing that you need to do here is I'm giving you a link to an online compiler so that you don't have to have anything installed as of now. And at this point, you might want to install Python, but I'm giving you link to an online compiler. I've pasted the link in the chat. Okay. So this compiler will support Python. Okay, so you can write your Python code in the compiler. Again, I've added the link on YouTube as well. I mean, YouTube Live as well. And I have added it on Zoom chat as well. So wherever you are joining the session from, you can take a look at this link. Again, it's very simple. It's just this link. You can just Google for this also. Program is Python compiler. Okay. And it will show up. Right. Now, what will happen is this compiler will basically be a full-fledged Python compiler. So what we can do is we can go ahead and directly write our Python code. So whatever we write here and we click on the run button, it will run it. You can install Python at this point. So you can go to python.org. That's the Python website, python.org. Over here, you can download the latest version. It will automatically detect your operating system. If it does not detect it, then here you have Python for Windows, Linux, Mac, etc. So you can install that, but you can just download it from here and that should install it. That's pretty much everything that you need. Once you install Python, you will be able to run Python from the terminal as well. But again, to skip that step or to remove this mandate that everybody has to have it installed, I am showing you another online compiler. So remember, I told you one such setup for a React app as well. But yes, so this is what I will be using for Python for now. And then, of course, when we write Django apps, then we'll write it in our system. Okay, so I'll walk you through how to make a new app and all, probably in the next session. But in this one, we are going to focus exclusively on Python to understand what is it, how it works, how it is different from JavaScript, right? How it is different, like what is the difference between front end and back end and all of those things. We'll talk about all of those things in the session today, right? Again, if you have any doubts or questions in this, you can always just put them in the chat and I'll be able to help you out. So I also have YouTube Live open from today. I was not able to open it earlier, but today I have YouTube Live open as well and Zoom open as well. So wherever you are, you can ask your questions and I should be able to help you with it either way. No matter even if you're on YouTube or Zoom, I should be able to see both questions, for questions from both places today. All right, great. Now, let's start off with this. So Python, as you all might know, is a programming language and it is a full-fledged programming language, which is to say that it is not like a mini version of something, but in fact, it is a full-fledged language. And again, technically speaking or theoretically speaking, we can use Python to write system code as well. Which means we can create applications like Windows apps or maybe other system applications on Python as well. And we can also create web applications on Python as well, which is what we are going to do. Now, Python does support creating, like backend web applications. And with Django as a framework, we can also create some front-end utilities like form fields or views, as we call them in Django. But that is for later. For now, we are talking about general Python as a programming language. So once we understand that, then we'll be able to incorporate Python or sort of modify Python, for us or to enable it to make backend web applications, which is going to be the next step for us. So far we have seen how to make UI. We have seen how to make elements, how to style them. We have seen how to handle events, how to, trigger or how to detect user actions, how to create dynamic pages using DOM. We have seen all of that, right? And that was the front end. We've also seen how to connect to API calls and all of that. So that is all there is to front end. Now, I mean, of course, there's a lot more to front end, but that's the gist of it. We should be able to create whatever component we want and connect to a backend. Now, in backend, we have three major things that we will cover one by one. The first is we will see how to create our own API endpoints, right? So in the next session, we'll spend some time understanding the Django structure and understand how can we create RESTful API endpoints using Django. So Django will help us create API endpoints. So remember how we connected to random user or open weather map or those other APIs and it returns some data. Well, with our backend with Django, we will be able to create those URLs that the user can connect to, and they will receive the data. So we will actually create our own APIs. That's the first backend step that we're going to implement. Once we have that, the second thing that we are going to have in the backend, of course, is our database. So again, so far, whatever data we have stored has been temporary, right? Every time we reload the browser, the data is lost. So it's temporary data. And now we'll take a look at how to store permanent data. So we call it data persistence, which means that the data stays in the database even after the user has exited the application. And then when they log in the next time, or when they open the app later, they'll be able to fetch the data and use that. So that part is something that again we will discuss, which is our second major backend functionality. And the third thing that we will talk about will be authentication. So in today's systems, in this year 2024, almost every application, no matter whatever you want to do, even if it is simply taking notes, you have to create an account, you have to log in, and only then you are given most of the application's data, or you are basically allowed to use the application. So no matter what app it is, no matter how big or small it is, they will give you some sort of a login functionality, which is what we mean by authentication. So that's going to be step three, or the third part, right? So in the backend, we have to cover three major topics. Number one, we'll cover creating our own endpoints, which is what we'll do today and tomorrow. I mean, in the next one. Then we'll go to the database connectivity. So we'll have two sessions for that. And then we'll have our authentication. We'll have one session on that. So that will be 5 sessions on the backend. And that leaves us with about 3 sessions that we will then create project in. So the last 3 sessions will be used to demonstrate a full-blown project, which is the Goodreads app. So we'll create the UI, we'll create the functionality, we'll create the database, and we'll do all of that, right? So effectively, the duration of live sessions is around 30 hours, which means 15 sessions in total. So this is the seventh session that is going on, right? So 7 plus maybe 4 or 5 more sessions on the back end. That makes it to 12 sessions, and then 3 sessions for a project. That's going to be the structure, right? Now, let's get started with this then. So again, you can install Python if you feel like. If you want to run Python scripts on your system, you can go ahead and install it. But I'm going to stick to this online compiler. And again, I've given you the link in the chat. If you want to follow along with me, you can also use this. Of course, I will give you the code in a Python file. So I'll copy paste it in a Python file, and I will upload the code for you. But yes, you can also follow along in this online compiler, right? Perfect. Now, just like other languages, the extension for Python is a .py extension, as you can see over here. So in this online compiler that we are using, we get a single file. It's called main.py, right? So this is the Python file which is available, .python. So just like we have .js for JavaScript, .html for HTML, .css for CSS. So in a similar way, we have the Python file, .py extension for Python, right? So whenever you want to save the code, right, you will have to use this extension, which is .py. All right, now let's start with the very fundamentals of what it is, and couple of things to keep in mind before we actually start writing Python code. So first up, we have to understand that unlike all other languages, Python is what we call a case white space sensitive language. This is probably the biggest difference between Python and other languages like Java, JavaScript, or C, C++. Most of those other languages are white space insensitive, which means even if we have some white space like an extra line in our code or some blank space in our code, it doesn't really matter. But with Python, it is very different. With Python, the idea is that every space will matter. Okay, so Python is very strict in that aspect, and this is primarily the biggest difference between the two, between Python and other languages. Now, you will find some syntax similarities to JavaScript. In fact, a lot of syntax similarities to JavaScript. Like the functions, the brackets, all of them are very similar. And another thing is that you do not have to put semicolons. I mean, semicolons are optional in case of Python. So unlike, I mean, they're optional in JavaScript as well, but we typically end up using them. But in the case of Python, you will see a lot of people simply ignore or skip the semicolons, which is fine. I mean, in Python, it's completely fine. So these are the two, three things to keep in mind. Number one, the extension is .py. Number two, the space matters. I'll give you more examples on this. And number three is that you will have a lot of similarity in terms of syntax between Python and JavaScript. So again, we'll explore that in more detail when we take more examples. Now, the very first thing that we have to do here is let us go ahead and simply try to print something on the screen. So let's say hello Python, for example. If we just print it, I run it, it will print hello Python on the screen. So we have to understand that there is a very clear-cut distinction between front-end languages and back-end languages. We have already talked about it, but I'll quickly repeat it in 2 minutes. So front-end languages are languages that are working in the browser, right? Or that can be executed in the browser. Basically, all the languages that the browser can speak or understand. For example, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. These are all languages that a web browser can understand, which means when we write HTML code or when we write JavaScript code or when we write CSS code, the browser already knows what is going on. There is no um, additional additional process needed, or the browser can directly understand those languages that's front end. But backend includes languages that the browser cannot directly understand. So that is why what we need for backend languages is a server, right? We need something called a server. So can you guys quickly tell me in the chat, how would you define a server? Let us say you have to explain what a server is to a 5-year-old kid who has no idea what technical terms are. How would you go about explaining what a server is to these kids? So let me know in the chat, what is your take on what a server is? Okay, let's read a couple of responses that you have put in the chat. Server is a thing that provides resources, an empty person to communicate, storing information. Okay, like shopkeeper, where he can give response to my request. Okay, nice. Provides resources, backend of our website, computer network. It's not a network. Um, okay, takes care of the network, software we need to download. Okay, so there are a lot of responses, which is great. Most of you are correct. You explained it differently, but most of you are correct. There are two things that define what a server is. Number one, a server is uh, it is a CPU, right? Very simply put, a server is nothing but a CPU. Just like we have a CPU in our laptop or a desktop, like a processor, RAM, and memory, like random hard disk, RAM, and processor. That combination is exactly what a server is as well. right? A server is simply put, a server is a data, is a machine, exactly like a computer, but without any display. So think of it like a CPU, which is lying in some data center somewhere in the world. So it's basically a machine, right? And what it does is it is always available to listen to requests, right? So whenever anybody wants to use some of that data, or whenever anybody wants to use one of our features, what we can do is we can redirect them to our server. The server will interact with the client, understand what they're looking for, and basically process the request. So that's what the server does. Okay. So now, for the front end languages, we don't really need a server because the browser can directly get the or understand it. The browser can directly understand the code, so it can directly get things done. But backend is not something the browser can understand, right? So backend languages include Python, JavaScript can also be used for the backend, but we have PHP, Java, Ruby, etc., etc. There are so many other languages which the browser cannot understand, right? So for this, what we need is we need another server, and you can think of it like a translator. So what the server will do is it will translate whatever the code we want, whatever functionality we are writing, and it will return HTML, CSS, JavaScript to the browser. So at the end of the day, the browser is still getting HTML, CSS, and JavaScript only, but the processing is done using backend, right? Using these languages, using a server. So when we use Python, we need a translator so that the Python language can be understood by the browser. So the translator will, understand the code, get it done, and respond to the browser or talk to the browser. Okay. So whenever we are running Python, what we are doing effectively is when you install Python on your system, what we are doing is we are installing a temporary server on our system, or to be more precise, we are installing tools which allow us to create a temporary or a local server on our system, right? So whenever we run Python code, like you go to the terminal and you try to run a Python file, what it will do is it will trigger a temporary server, or it will create a local server within our system. And that server is going to then be able to run Python commands. If you open a Python file directly in the browser, it will just show you the code. It is not going to understand what that code is. Similarly, if you open any other file like PHP or Java, your browser is not going to understand the code. It's just going to display the code to you. Unlike HTML, where it shows you those elements, or CSS, where we see those styles, or JavaScript, where we see functionality, in case of a Python code, the browser will plain simple show you the code because it does not understand what is written, right? So that's why we need an external server or an additional server to run backend code. Okay, that's our setup. Now, this line of code that we have written here, this is just going to print something on the terminal in the console, just like we have console.log in JavaScript. In a similar way, we have hello Python in Python, right? So let me show you a couple of other quick examples. So printing in console/terminal, because this output is never going to be on the front end, on the UI. This output will always go to the terminal, and then of course we can write some code to write it or show it on the UI. That's on us. But the backend code is never directly going to the UI. It's typically just performing the functionality, and accordingly we can then update or modify the UI, right? So that's our setup. Now let's get to the next line. So I'm just going to keep it. And then the second thing that we have to discuss is, just like we have variables and data types in JavaScript, in the exact same way, we have a couple of variables and data types in Python as well. Just like JavaScript is smart enough to understand what type of variable we are using, Python is also smart enough to understand what value it is. So we don't have to explicitly create any data type. But again, just like JavaScript supports string, number, Boolean, etc. In the exact same way, Python also supports, string, number, Boolean, etc. So it's the same setup with Python as well, right? So we can say, for example, employee name is equal to John, and it will work fine, right? Similarly, we can say employee age is equal to, let's say, 45, and this will also perfectly work fine, right? So there will be no problems with this. and we can print them out. So we can say print employee name, for example. So if I run this now, you can see John gets printed, no problem, very simple. And so this is the kind of stuff that we can do in terms of data type. So we don't have to explicitly define the type of data. Python is smart enough to understand it. Again, Python supports all standard things like strings and numbers and Boolean, like true, false, and all other values as well. Then in Python, unlike JavaScript, or there is a similar approach in JavaScript as well, not exactly the same, but we do have it. Is that we can actually use some special syntax. For example, so we can say the name of the employee is, right? And then I can put a colon here and I can put curly brackets. So these curly brackets are a special syntax. And if we just write F before this, it is going to allow us to format the statement by actually using the variables, right? So here employee name turns white. So what is going to happen is this is going to be replaced by the value that we have, right? So you can see here, hello Python, this is the first line. The name of the employee is John. Okay. Again, there's nothing to zoom out. If I zoom out, the ad shows up. So just to avoid that ad, I am zooming in, right? So for people who are saying zoom out, there is nothing to zoom out. It's just that there's an advertisement that shows up, right? So this is how we can, have more dynamic content without using concatenation or any of that. Even though concatenation is also supported, but this is a far better approach, because if you have two, three, four variables, then you will have to end double quote, start double quote. So concatenation becomes difficult. On the other hand, over here, it's directly formatable like this. So we just put an F before the string, and then we can go ahead and we can just mention the variable names, right? Perfect. So these are variables and data types. Now, in addition to this, unlike a lot of other languages, what Python does really, really well is that it gives us access to four data structures that are built in. Okay, there are four data structures that are built into Python, and they are really, really important for our backend functionality. So the first structure is called a list. Okay, so we have list, then we have something called a set, something called a tuple, and we have something called a dictionary. So these are four data types that Python provides us, which are additional ways or more complex ways to store data. Okay, so what we're doing is we have, let us say that we have a products list. So in JavaScript, you would call this an array. In Python, we call it a list. Okay, so again, it's just a name that is different. So let us say that, we have several products like shampoo. This is one product. Then we can have conditioner. Let us say that we have moisturizer, for example, right? And then we might have a perfume, for example. So we have four products that are stored in a list. Again, I can say print products, and it will just print them out like this, right? Shampoo, conditioner, moisturizer, and perfume. Now, these three things, list, set, and tuple, are very similar except for the brackets that are used. So if you are using a square bracket, it is a list, right? If I use the same setting, let us say, let's call it best sellers is equal to, and I can put round brackets. So round brackets make a tuple. Round brackets make a tuple. I can use the same thing like shampoo, conditioner, for example. And then similarly, let us say that we have recommended products. So recommended and curly brackets are a set. Okay, curly brackets make a set. So again, I can put the same values in all three places, and you will see the result is fine. We can print the other two things out as well, and there'll be no major, modification in the output. So I'm going to print bestseller and I'm going to print recommended as well. So there's nothing changed except for the brackets, of course. So square brackets are lists. Now lists in Python are immutable. Are mutable, which means we can edit these values later. So let us say that, 5 minutes later or 10 minutes later, the user is adding something to this. like a shopping cart. Think of it like a shopping cart. So I've added one product to the cart. Now, obviously, I would want the user to be able to add a second product. And then I would want the user to be able to add a third product and so on. Right. So in those cases where we want the list to change, we want the list to be able to modify, we use a list. So that's what we are using here. So if later we say products dot add, for example, and I add a new product, let's say some serum, for example, it will work fine, right? Of course, add is incorrect, but it should be append. But again, the point is you can see that the value shows up now, right? It shows up in the list. So lists are immutable, which means we can modify values. They are not constant or fixed. They can be changed. I can also delete the list or remove something from the list. All of that can be done. Unlike that, in the case of a tuple, tuples are usually constants, right? So later, if we try to modify this, let us say bestseller.append, let's check. I am not 100% sure if this will work. You can see it's not working, right? Because tuples are constant values. They are non-modifiable. So once you define a tuple, once you give its initial set of values, you can no longer change them. These values will stay constant throughout the execution of the program. And this is a really important scenario, right? Let us assume that we have some status values that should never be changed. For example, in a sales application, we could have converted leads, denied leads, potential leads, next time leads, whatever it is, right? So we have these 4, 5 status values, and you have to pick from that. You can't put a random value on your own. That's where tuples come in. So they're used for scenarios where we're looking for a specific set of values, like a drop-down list, values of a drop-down list, etc. That makes a tuple. Similarly, so there's another difference. Let me show you. So if I just put a shampoo twice in this one, for example, it will be visible. Okay, so you can just see here that in both cases, shampoo shows up at the end as well, right? However, in the case of a set, it will not show up again. Okay, because the classic, you can see that shampoo shows up only once, even though we have mentioned it twice, because the characteristic of a set or the properties of a set are such that it cannot have duplicates. Okay. Now this is coming from mathematics because in case of mathematics we do have the setup where a set cannot contain duplicate values. So that's exactly the set that we get in Python as well. Even if we are trying to store a duplicate, it's not storing the duplicate at the end of the day. It's going to go through all the values and just pick the unique values from the list or from whatever is provided in the input. Okay, so that's going to be our list, right? Tuple and set. So this is our set. So curly brackets is our set, round brackets is a tuple, and then square brackets is a set. These are the 3 fundamental data types that are available, in Python. So this is a tuple. I'll just comment it here so that you can have it later. This is a set. And then the last type that we have available is a dictionary. Now, dictionary is a more advanced type, where we can store multiple things in one name, under one name. So this is a very real world scenario. Again, let us assume that you want to store some data about driving license, for example. So driving license will have multiple things, like date of issue, date of expiry, who issued it, which city it is, which country it is, etc., etc. So multiple values can be stored together in what is called a dictionary. So what I can say is, for example, let us say we store product prices, and then one by one for each product, we can assign a price to it. So shampoo, for example, is 100 rupees, for instance, right? Then we can have conditioner. This can be say 75 rupees, for example, and we can keep going. We can add, prices for everything that we want. So, moisturizer, this could be say 200 rupees or let's say 50 rupees, whatever it is. And then we end it with a curly bracket. So everything within curly brackets, but with key value pairs. So shampoo is the key, 100 is the value, conditioner is the key, 75 is the value, moisturizer is the key, 50 is the value. So these key value pairs, they make up a dictionary. Okay, so again, we can have whatever values we want to store. All of that can be stored here. And this is the fourth inbuilt data type that Python provides. So we have list, set, tuple, and dictionary. And again, we can go ahead and try to print it. And it will print fine. So if I just run this, it will print it again using key value pairs like shampoo 100, conditioner 75, moisturizer 50, etc. It can also take decimal values, obviously. So all, whatever we provide will be fine. And now it should give us all decimal places or with decimal values. You can see 100.1, 75.27, 50.0, etc. Right? So that's the setup. Now, when we print things out, in the case of this one, which is our tuple, it will always print it either in descending or ascending order. Here it's printing it in, some order. So LMNO PQRS, right? And then we have the values, but they will be unique. They must be unique, have to be unique. And then these two will maintain the order of the display. So list and tuple will maintain the order in which you have given the input, but a set will give you values in alphabetical order in some fashion. Okay, so here we can see shampoo, conditioner, moisturizer, perfume, and shampoo. That's exactly the order that we have specified. But over here in the recommended case, it is different. Okay, first it shows shampoo, conditioner. First it shows perfume, whereas perfume is the fourth value when we declared it, because they will be reset according to the alphabetical order, right? So there is some order that is maintained over there. Then this is what a dictionary looks like. We can have multiple values over here. We can also nest this within each other. So for example, if we want to put this within if you want to put a set or a dictionary or a tuple inside, if you want to put a list or a set or a tuple inside a dictionary, you can do that. Okay, that's perfectly acceptable and perfectly fine. Okay, so this is the fundamental stuff, the absolute fundamental stuff. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this on the screen and I'm going to give you a question as a challenge to solve. Okay, so I'll give you 5 minutes and I would want you to try to solve the question. So I'll just put the question on the screen in just a minute and then you should be able to solve it. So I'll give you some 5 minutes for you to try it out on your own and then we'll move to the next part. So just give me a minute. I'll just pull up the question on the screen. Okay, so here we go. I have the question ready. It's up on the screen now. So I will give you a few minutes for this. It's 5:50 right now. I'll give you about 5 minutes or so. What I want you to do is I want you to try to do this on your own. I mean, of course, you can look at Google, you can try to find out the answer from other resources, but it's a unique question. You will not find the exact same question anywhere else, right? So this is the question. What you need to do is you have to perform 3 steps. Step one, you have to write the code to print Bob's score. This is reading. And then you have to add a new student. So basically, I've given you CRUD: create, read, update, and delete. All 4 tasks have been given to you. You can see them on the screen now. Okay. So before I tell you the solution or before I walk you through it, I'll give you about 5 minutes. Do let me know in the chat. Just put a done when you're able to finish this off in the chat, and we'll go from there. Okay. So we'll try to do this in about 5 minutes, and then we'll continue to the next part. So I am just trying to put up a timer next to it. Let me see if I am able to do it. Uh, so is a timer. Okay, perfect. So here is the timer next to the question. All right. So you can just try to finish it off in the given time. And hopefully we will then discuss the correct answer as well. Okay. So I have kept the timer on the screen, and I'm just trying to make sure it does not interfere with the question at all. Okay, looks good. So this is the timer. The question is on the left and it's not blocking anything. So everything in the question must be visible. And yes, so once the timer is done, let's come back and continue from there. Okay. So yes, let me know once you're done, just put it done in the chat and we'll continue. Right, and the time is up. So let me stop the timer. Second. Okay, there we go. So yes, now let's continue with our discussion. So I hope everybody was able to give this a try. I have a couple of done in the chat. I've also received a couple of code snippets, which is great. But yes, now let me quickly show you how to work with this. So the reason I just gave this to you as a challenge is because again, in a lot of real world scenarios, you will have to figure things out on your own. So I'm just giving you a quick idea of how that is going to be like. But yes, so let's start with the first one. I'll just comment everything out and let's go step by step. So the first thing here is we have to create a dictionary with called student scores. So this is going to be our first step. So student scores is equal to, and then these are the three values that we want to add. So let me just quickly add them in. Now these must be comma separated. If you don't give commas, Python will get angry at you and it will not work. So it's important that we give those commas. All right. So this is the dictionary creation. Again, we don't need a semicolon here. If it were C, C++ or Java, we would have given a semicolon. But again, in Python, we don't really need to do that. Right. So this is the first step, create a dictionary. This is what we have done. Now, the next step is to write a code to print Bob's score from this dictionary. So the dictionary is effectively like a list, okay? And we can extract the values using the key. So in the case of a list or an array in JavaScript, if you remember, we were able to get the array values, or we are able to get the array values using indexes, right? So we start with 0 and we go till size -1. And here in Python, or in the case of a dictionary, or even in a JavaScript object, we can access the value using the key that we have defined, right? So since this is a custom key value pair, in our case, Alice is the key. I mean, name is the key. So Alice, Bob, and Charlie are our keys. We can do is we can say print, and then within student score, we want to access Bob's value or Bob's score. So if we just do this, we should be score 90, as you can see in the output, right? So this is what is basically the setup. So this is how that works. So we are saying print the scores of Bob. Okay, print the scores of Bob. That's what we have. Perfect. Now next up, add a new student Diana with a score of 92 to the dictionary. So it's very simple. You don't have to append anything of that sort. But what you can do is you can directly add it by adding another key. So again, we can say student underscore scores. And then within brackets, we can add Diana is equal to, and we can set it to 92. That's it. Again, we don't need a semicolon. We can try to print the dictionary and check if the value is getting added or not. So I can print it out. Okay, so Alice 85, Bob 90, Charlie 78, and then Diana got added 92. Okay, now again, you can see the resemblance here is that in the case of a set, also we use curly brackets. In the case of a dictionary, also we use curly brackets, and you cannot have duplicate keys in a dictionary, right? So if you try to have the same value again and replace it with 90, you will see that only the second value will be kept. Okay, Diana's value, or there will be only unique keys. You can't create a second key, with the same name. So you can't have something like this. If you say this, Alice 85 and then Alice 90, then it will give you an error. Right? It will say that something is, it should not give you an error. It should just use the second value. So you can see it uses Alice 90. It is forgotten. It is ignored that Alice was 85. The score was 85. So it will take the second value or the latest value. Now that is the next part. We want to update Alice's score to 88. So we can just update it like this, right? We can modify. So this is the updation. Okay. So we have created the list, we have read from the list, we have added to the list, we have updated the value, and finally we have to delete it. So for deletion, again, we have a very simple setup, which is DEL. That's it, delete. And what do we want to delete? Well, we want to delete Charlie's setup, right? So we want to delete Charlie's score, which is here So we can say student scores and then pass in Charlie. We have to pass in the key. So it will delete that particular key from the list. You can see now we only have Alice, Bob, and Diana, and Charlie's value is gone. Okay, so this is a very, very important part like dictionary, because whenever we do any real world setup like a shopping cart, or things like that, then we are using dictionaries there. So in a shopping cart, what happens is we have product IDs and each product we have quantity. Okay, so let us say that you're ordering some, I don't know, cake or something. So you will say, Black Forest pastry, two quantity, then you will add, let's say, a cheesecake, one quantity. So you are doing the same thing over there. You have the product ID against the quantity, for example. So whenever you add a product to the cart, remove a product from the cart, modify the quantity, this is exactly what we need to do in our backend as well, right? So it's very, very, very realistic, and it's very, very, very important as well. So it's really important that you know how these things work. Okay, these four data structures are fundamental to how we perform most of our logic in Python. So list, set, tuple, and dictionary. These are four really, really important data structures available in Python. Okay, now I'm just curious. So in the chat, just let me know how many of you got all four right. Like I gave you this challenge, right? So how many of you got all questions correct? You can just put a me, yes, something in the chat, like a me or yes. So I know how many of you were able to get it right. All four, not one, two, all four. Okay, that's great. How about three? How many of you were able to get three right? Just put a three in the chat. If you got three right, put a three in the chat. Okay, three. Great. Okay, good. So even if you, so, deletion was the only challenging part here because there's a slightly different syntax. The other three things were still fine. Okay, perfect. So this is the next bit that we have in Python. Now let's continue this discussion and take it one step further. So far what we have done is we have talked about how to deal with the data, right? Now, there are a couple of other programming constructs that Python provides us, obviously, which is we have loops, we have decision making, we have classes and objects, and so many things. And it's going to take a while, to discuss all of them. So today we are going to take a look at some of the standard functions, some of the standard things, and then we'll move to some other like in the next session and all, we will move to some more difficult concepts like classes and objects, etc. But today we're looking at some standard things. So next up, we have something called conditional statements. In Python, it's very simple, but let's quickly discuss them. So conditional statements are basically statements that allow us to make decisions based on a particular condition. We can decide whether something should run or not. For example, if the user is logged in, they should be able to shop. If they are not logged in, they should not be able to shop, right? Or if the user is logged in, they see the log out button. If they are logged out, they see the login button. So there are a lot of these conditional outputs that we want to show, and that is taken care of with the help of these conditional statements, right? So let me give you a very simple example. Let us say that we have a bank, we are creating some system for a bank, and the bank wants to allow senior citizens to open an account if their age is more than 65. So we can have a variable called age, which is storing the value 65 in this case. And then we can write some logic. So we can say if age is greater than equal to 65, then we have to put a colon. So this is our first look at Python space problems. And then we can say print, you are eligible for senior citizen account. So I'm just giving you a simple example. Now, this is where we will see where, or how Python's spacing is a problem. So this particular syntax that you see here, let me just zoom in so that we can see this better, right? So if space age is greater than equal to 65, then a colon, and then this P has indented. So we call this indentation, right? Indentation or indented. So basically we say that it is indented, which means indented, which means one tab has been added. So if you write it like this, it will give you an error. Legit, it will give you an error. You can see here, it says you are eligible, indentation error, expected an indented block. Okay. So this is what I'm talking about. This is where Python goes a little out of hand and becomes a little difficult. But what we have to do is whatever code. So if this was JavaScript, this is how it would be. We say if this in brackets, then we put curly brackets, and everything in curly brackets is the code in the if block. But Python does not work like this. Okay, Python does not understand this bracket and all. Python needs indentation. So for Python, what we have to do is we have to put a colon, and everything after the colon, as long as it is indented, it will be a part of if. So if you want to add multiple lines, you can add them here. Okay, let's say second, print third. All of these are now a part of the if. As soon as we have something in the same level as if, like this else, then this will no longer be, then the if block will end. So these three lines are a part of the if block. Why? Because they are indented. They have some spacing to the left. So as long as we push them here, as long as we push them inside, then they will be a part of if. As soon as the code comes back out, comes back to the same level as if, then it is no longer a part of if. Okay, so this is now else. And again, we will have a similar line. Let us say that you are not, let's say you are not eligible for senior citizen account. So I'll just copy this and paste it like so. And I will remove these two things. We don't really need that. Okay, and done. Now, if I run this, okay, since our age is 65 and we are comparing it with greater than equal to, it will match. And we get you are eligible for senior citizen account. If we change the age to 75 and run this, okay, now you are eligible for senior citizen. So this is not working as expected. Let's see. Let's see why. Because the print is a problem. So we have to say print, not printf. Now, when we run this, it says you are, oh yes, it should be less than 65, my bad. So when I change it to 55, then it will say you are not eligible. And as long as the age is more than 65, so that 65 or more, we will get you are eligible. So both our conditions are showing up, which means our code is fine. Okay. So this is our setup with conditional, conditional statements in Python. The simplest way of conditional statements in Python, which is if else. Okay. Now, what we have to understand here is we cannot really take user input in Python. I mean, we can, but we cannot take it if we are adding server side code. The reason for that again is because a server is getting data from a request, right? So I'm sure you already know about this, but let me quickly explain to you how things work. So what happens is, first up, we have a client machine, right? So let us say that this is a client machine. We just make a simple laptop like this. So we have some keyboard here, whatever it is. So this is a client machine. And then we will have a server, some sort of a server processing on the other end, right? Now, what happens is whenever the client wants to load something on the screen, so let us say they want to open up a website or whatever it is, they will first send a request, right? So that is done. The website is loaded. Now, the next thing is the client wants to authenticate. They want to log in. So what the client will do is the client will read, put some data here, right? They will enter their username, password. They will click on the button, submit button, login button, whatever it is. Then what will happen is that login button will trigger a request. Okay. So that login button will trigger a request. And this request will contain the necessary data from the form. Okay. Then the server will connect to the database, it will do the processing, and then it will send a response back to the client. So RES response will be sent to the client, right? So this is how the client server model works. So again, even like technically speaking, Python does have the ability to take, I mean, user input. Of course, there are functions available. Like for example, we can use the input method. So Python has something called input which is where you can read some input from the user. But in a realistic web development scenario, web development backend scenario, we will not read input from the user directly, because the input will only come with a request, right? Unless we get a request from the client, the server is effectively idle. The server is not going to do any task unless the client sends a request, right? So that is how it is going to be. Okay. So now a quick challenge for you, for if else, for this conditional block. So let me just put up the question again. I'll give you a quick challenge and then we'll move to the next part. Okay, so here is your question. It's a slightly complicated scenario, but it's very simple. It's all real world-ish. So what you need to do is you're designing a ticketing system for a movie theater, and the prices of the tickets are based on two factors, the age and the day. So depending on that, the details are mentioned, like what age is what price. And so these are discounted based on week. So weekends, a discount of $2, and on weekdays, there are no discounts. So you have to basically write a function, or basically you can skip the function part. You can just try to write the code. We'll discuss functions next, but what you need to do is you need to calculate the final ticket price. Let me just change this. So calculate the final ticket price based on these factors. Okay. So you will have two variables instead of one. You will have a variable age, you will have a variable base price, and then you will try to do the logic. Okay. So that's the setup. And again, you will use simple if else, check for age and day, and accordingly calculate the final price. Okay. So again, I'll give you a few minutes for this. I am trying to pull up the timer again. Let's see if I can pull that up, and I'll put it on the screen side by side. So I'll give you 5 minutes. Let me give you 7 minutes. It's a slightly more complicated one. So I'll give you 2 more minutes. So 7 minutes. And let's see if we can do it in 7. Okay. So I've put the timer on the screen. Let me just put it on the bottom somewhere so that it does not affect the question. Okay, I've just pushed the question to the left. So yes, here's the timer, and all the best. I'll give you about 6 minutes to quickly get this done. And then I'll show you the solution, and we'll discuss one more concept, which is functions. And that will be more or less it for the day. So try this out. If you are able to finish it off early, just put a done in the chat so that I know that you are done and we can quickly move to the solution. Okay. So yes, I'll wait for about 5 minutes, and these 2 minutes are bonus for you. If you are able to get it done in 5, we'll stop the timer at 5 and continue. So just put a done in the chat when you're done. All right, so we have one, two, three people. Three people are done. I'm waiting for a few more. If about 50, 60 of you are done, then we can continue. So let me know in the chat if you're done and we'll continue. Just put it done in the chat if you're able to try this out, and then we'll discuss the answer quickly and continue. Okay, so the time is up. Let me stop the timer now and we can go ahead and quickly discuss the solution for this. So I'm going to copy this and paste it in our compiler. Again, I will put the entire code on GitHub as soon as the session is done. But for now, pay close attention to the logic. Okay, so we have to calculate the final price. We have two factors to consider. So let us quickly make variables to store these factors. So the first variable could be age, right? So since we already have a variable age, let me call it ticket age or something like that, because we should not be confusing between the two. So that's one. And the second thing that we need to store, so let's make this say 20 for our data to start with. The second thing that we need is the base price. So this is going to be 0 to start with. Then we need the weekend days. So how do we know it's the weekend? Well, we can check it out in weekend days. So we can make this a list. It can be Saturday and Sunday. Now you can add a if also, but this is a better approach. So weekdays, and this will be all the other days in the list. So that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, okay, and then Thursday and Friday. Okay, so we're going to have these many days in the week and weekends. And then what we need is we need a day that the user is giving. So let's call it a Wednesday. This is our input day. So we will apply discount based on this. And then we need a discount based on this. So again, initially there is 0% discount. And finally, we need the final price, which is again going to be 0 to start with. So this is all the data that we need. Okay. So we need the age of the customer. Then we need the figure out the discount for the day of the week. And then final price will obviously be base price plus discount. So this is going to be, sorry, base price minus discount. This is going to be our final price. Now let us go ahead and write our logic. So the first logic that we have obviously is age wise. So we can say if age is less than equal to 12, that's our first category of users. So we can say that the base price is equal to 5, right? That's the first setup. Else if, now in other languages, you will find something called else if. In Python, we have a shortcut called elif. Okay. So elif will take another condition, and this is like saying if it is does not match this condition, then check for this condition. So the second is that age is greater than what is our setup? Senior 65 and above. So age is greater than equal to 65. Then the base price must be 6. Okay, so that's 6. Otherwise, in all other cases, which is for our normal adult audience, like people who are 13 to 64, it is 10. So else the base price can be equal to 10. Okay, now we can use zeros if you want to keep it decimal. That's completely up to us. Right, perfect. So base price is calculated. First step is done. Then we have to calculate this week discount. So for this, we can write another piece of if else. Here, it can be a little different. So we can say if day in weekend days. So this is a slightly different syntax. We are not comparing it manually, but we are saying check if the day that we have, which is Wednesday, is in this list. So it will return a true or a false. It's a valid condition check available in Python. So then discount will be equal to 2. Otherwise, else if, right? Else if day in weekdays. Okay, then we have discount equal to 0. Discount equal to 0. Otherwise, else it can be that we can say invalid, but we don't really need it. Instead of elif, we can keep it else because it will either be in weekdays or week end. It will be one of the two. So we can simply say if day in weekend days, it is Saturday or Sunday, then apply the discount. Otherwise, if it's a weekday, then there is no discount. Perfect. And then finally, we already have this final price is equal to base price minus discount. That's it. And then we can print it out. So we can say print final underscore price. So let's see what we get. Run it. We get 6.0 because it's what is our age? Our age is 20. So that's adult price. And the day is a weekday. So we should have gotten 10 here. So there is something off. Um, Okay, let's check. So if, oh yes, ticket age, we forgot to check for, we were checking the other age. That age is 65. So that was catching the senior citizen discount. But in our case, we have to check the ticket age. So this is perfect because age is 20. So that's a $10 ticket, 10 ticket fee. And this is the one 10. And then it's a weekday. So there is no discount. So 10. If I change it to a weekday, then it should change to 8 and it does, which is perfect, right? So this is our setup for this case, okay, where we have given some, okay, we've given some inputs and accordingly we have written a more complicated decision, right, which is more realistic. This is the kind of stuff that we see in real world, right? When booking movie tickets and stuff like that, this is how it works. So I hope this makes sense to you, and I hope you guys were able to get it done. Perfect. So this brings us to the last topic that I want to quickly discuss. And after that, we can take questions from the chat if there are any. But I quickly want to talk to you about another very important concept in Python, which is called a function. Okay, so there is something called a function which is available in Python, and it basically is a named block of code. Very simply put, a function is nothing but a named block of code. Okay, named block of code. And what we can do is we can write functions and we can, basically we can go ahead and we can just reuse them whenever we need. So, and then, we can also, what we can also do is we can accept some values, we can return some values, etc., etc. So all of that can be done with the help of a function. Okay. So that's a setup. But what I think we'll do is we'll discuss it in a very basic sense today, and then we'll elaborate on it more later in the next one as well, because otherwise we will run out of time today. But very simply put, the way functions work is we use the define keyword, that's DEF for definition. And then we use function underscore name, okay, whatever name we want to give. And then in round brackets, we have to provide the arguments that are available for a given function. Okay. So for example, let us say that we want to create a very simple function to square a number. So we can say define square. Okay, so square, and then we can provide the number as the argument. Then what will this do? Well, at the end of the day, the function should return number times number. That's how it, that's the calculation in the function, logic of the function. And then how do we call it? Well, we can say result is equal to square of 5. And then we can say print result. Okay. So this is a very simple example of how a function works. And you can see we get 25. Now, instead of having a single line of code, this function could have multiple lines of code, right? And instead of taking a single argument or a single parameter, the function can take a lot more parameters as well. The return will be a single thing. It can only return one thing. It can be anything like a list or whatever, but it can return a single value. It is not possible to return multiple values from a function. Okay. Now, when we do this line 109, what we're doing here is we are calling the function. So the technical term here is a function call. We are making a call to the function. So 5 will be replaced here. So number will take the value 5. Then this will say 5 into 5, 25. So 25 will be returned by the function. And then we have to store it somewhere. Okay. So square 5 will return 25, which we are storing in the result. Now we can skip this and we can directly pass it in the print as well. That will also be fine. But typically we will want it in some other calculations as well, right? We will want it is in some other calculations as well. So we can go ahead and we can store it in the result, and then we can use result for whatever other setup we would want. So yes, we can return multiple values like in one tuple or one list. We can return one variable, one tuple, one list, or one dictionary, whatever, but only one item. You cannot have, say, return number one comma number two. Number can be any, like number one can be any data type, but it cannot contain multiple returns. Okay, that's not permitted. But yes, the number, I mean, the return value could be of any type. Okay, like it could be a tuple, it could be a list, it could be a dictionary, whatever it is. But we typically stick to one return. One function should return one value, and then we can use that value for further calculations whenever we need. Okay, that's a normal setup that we have. Okay, so yes, that's the setup that we have in Python. And again, whoever is writing this in the chat, like pasting the same message 100 times. It's okay if you want to share something, please do, but don't repeat it like this. I cannot read other doubts that come in between. So I would really request that I am reading every single message coming in the chat. So please write it only once. I'll be able to read it. You don't have to paste it 100 times for me to read it. I read all messages. Don't worry. All right. Perfect. So that's the setup that we have for a function. And again, we will explore this in more detail. We'll explore some other possibilities. There's something called lambda functions. We have map, filter, reduce, and a couple of other different types of functions as well. So we'll take a look at them one by one in the next session that we are going to have, right? For now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go ahead and create a new file, and I'll just why this is session 7. So I'm just calling it session 7 .py, and I am just going to go ahead and paste the code over here. So I'm just updating it live, like right now in GitHub itself, so that you have access to it immediately as well. Okay, so just give me a minute and I'll update that. I think I saved it somewhere else by mistake. Uh, there we go. And done. Okay. So one of you can quickly check the recording, check the repository, and quickly tell me if you are able to access the file. You can see session 7 or not. I have pasted the link of the repository in the chat again. So today's topic is fundamentals of Python in case you were asking for that. But yes, so you can quickly check once and just let me know if you are able to see this in the repository. Okay, I've updated it over there. I will add the session links there as well soon. So after the session is done, both the previous sessions link also and this session's link also, I will add it over there. Okay. Now we are open for questions. So if you have any doubts or questions regarding anything in general that we have discussed so far, please let me know. Now we are open for questions. The team will send the attendance link in just a minute, right? So yes, so they will send the attendance link. You can have it. You can write it from there. But yes, if you have any other doubts or questions, do let me know. We are open for questions now. So like I said, in today's session, we have looked at the fundamentals of Python. And then in the next one, we are going to go ahead and, take a look at some more other advanced concepts like functions, like functions and um, classes and objects and other concepts. And then we'll eventually make our way to Django, which is the framework that we will have, within our backend. Okay, so we're going to do that. And yeah, that's going to be our setup. So yes. So it's a programming thing, right? Python will, it's an optional thing for Python, like, semicolons are not needed. They are optional in that sense. But yes, most programming languages use semicolons as an indication of the end of a statement. Python uses the next line, like the enter key, as the end of the statement. So that's the difference. In other programming languages, you can write two statements in one line because of the semicolon. In Python, you cannot do that. So that's the difference, right? Yes. So again, whoever, so I don't see the name is just a dot here. But anyway, for people who are putting it in the chat that we can return multiple values and all, we will explore that soon. Okay, we'll explore that in the next session. There is an exception to that. Like I already said, we'll talk more about functions in the next session. So please give me some time. It is not possible to cover every exception in one session. So we'll explore everything. Don't worry. Just trust me on this. Okay. And just follow along with what I'm telling you. I will tell you everything. Okay. Don't worry about it. But yes, there are a lot of exceptions in languages like Python. So we'll explore more about functions and some other topics in the next session. Difference between dictionary and list. So it's very simple. In the case of dictionary, what we do is we have a key value pair, right? We have a key value pair. So you have to have a key that you give. Like, for example, in our case, we have the username. You can give anything as a key. And then there is a corresponding value for the key. So it has to be a key and a value pair. A list is only values. There are no keys in a list. It's just values. So to access items in a list, we have to use its position. So we use the index 0, 1, 2, like that. To access a dictionary, we use the key. So we say student and student name. Instead of saying student of 0, we use student name. So those are the major differences between the two. A dictionary can also be modified, a list can also be modified, but they are similarities. But yes, so major differences are lists do not contain keys and hence they are accessed using the position, using numbers, indexes, and not using keys. Okay, so Pawan, if your auto save is not working in VS Code, you have to change a setting. I will quickly show you. I already showed it the other day, but let me quickly show it to you once again. So I'll just share my screen. Okay, just give me 1 minute. This is a setting for, there are two settings. One setting is for prettier, and then one setting is for VS Code. Okay, so you can go to settings from, where is that? Yes, here from the bottom, there is a manage button. Okay, this settings icon, and then go to uh, settings. Okay, so you can go to settings. Just look for format on save. Okay, there's a setting called format on save. Please enable it. Okay, so this will be disabled by default. So please enable it. Okay, format on save. And then this is the first setting. And then auto save. you have to also set auto save. Okay. So auto save, please check all the relevant boxes. So what I do is auto save after delay. Okay. So this would mean that it will automatically save it every few seconds and accordingly it will work. Okay. You can also enable auto save on edit. I think there is some other setting which is save on edit or something like that. So whenever we change anything, it will automatically save it. And once you save it, it will enable the formatting. So enable that. And the second thing that you have to do is go to the prettier settings. So for that, go to the prettier extension. Okay, so go to prettier. Uh, okay, so go to prettier, go to settings, extension settings, and then over here you have to scroll down and again enable. So this could be disabled by default. So please enable it. Okay. Now, once you do this, then what will happen is the first time when you control save, when you try to save it the first time, it will ask you to choose a default formatter. Okay. So please choose a default formatter and that should do it. Okay. So these are the 2, 3 things that you must do in order to enable that option. So again, Akash, it's a programming language thing. Some languages have print, C++ have print F, Java has system.out.print. So there are different functions available for different languages, right? So that's the idea. So Akmal Amir, you can access all the previous session recordings on the GitHub repository. I'm giving you the link again in the chat. Please take it from there. All the other recordings from all the previous sessions are already available over there. Okay. And again, this is going to be a Python based stack. So we're not covering Express. Instead, we're going to cover Django in the backend. So just note that we are going to conduct Django based backend and not Express. Okay, perfect. So that's it for this one. I've answered almost all the questions. There's nothing else in YouTube live as well. So thank you so much, you guys, for attending. The attendance link has been shared in the chat, both on YouTube as well as on Zoom. So please make sure you fill that in before you go. And yes, make sure you fill out the form, and uh, mention. Okay, let me just check with the team. The attendance link is not working. So, Teja, you can please check the attendance link. I think is showing times up. So please update it and send it again. Um, I'll just also inform the team just a second. Yes, so you guys just wait for a minute. The team is working on it. They will resend the attendance link in just a minute. So please give them a minute. Don't worry, we'll send it to you. Okay, don't worry. They're just sending it in a minute. Okay, so let's just wait for them to resend the link. Please make sure you guys fill that in before you leave, right? It's very important that your attendance is marked. So just hold on for a minute and fill it in before you leave. Okay, I've already informed them. The team is on it. Okay. Again, so, in the attendance link, please make sure that you provide proper feedback. So if you really like something, please mention it over there that this is good. Whatever example is good, explanation is good, whatever you think is good. And then also write if you think that there is something that needs to be better or something that is not good, you expecting something else or like that. So you can mention that also because the team sends this feedback to me on a daily basis, right? So that I can take a look at it and I can make sure that we cover whatever is missing or, whatever you guys mention in the feedback as well. Okay. Now the next session is going to be on Friday, right? Same time. 5 o'clock on Friday. So 5 to 7. Again, if there are any changes or any updations in the timings, you will be informed about them. But as of now, the session is Friday 5 to 7. Okay. The correct link is now shared in the chat. Okay. Please open that up. I have just tested it. That is working fine. So please use the new link that has now been shared in the chat. Okay. So the next class will be on Friday, 5 to 7. So yes, I'll see you guys in the next one. Make sure to fill the attendance before you leave. Thank you so much for attending. Have a great day. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.